Welcome everyone to our webinar, Spooky AI, Unmasking the Future of Copilot Technology. Today is Thursday, October 24th, 2024. My name is Jeff Lizerbaum. I'm a pre-sales solutions architect here at Managed Solution. Now, what's cool about this episode, I'm going to be joined alongside me, Sean Farrell, our founder and CEO of Managed Solution, who's going to give us a lot of insight into the day in the life of a CEO and how AI and Copilot work in his favor. Let's get into the agenda here. Now, we're going to start off actually with showing you some of the nuances that are coming with Copilot Wave 2. In case you haven't heard it, there's a new wave of Copilot coming our way. And if you are using Copilot today, you're probably already seeing some of the things that are entering into the Copilot experience, some things that are changing. We're going to go over some of those changes and when things are going to actually get released officially with Wave 2. The next thing we're going to be covering is Sean will be sharing his real-world CEO and C-suite scenarios. Now, this is going to be a perspective, of course, from what a CEO does day to day. It's very interesting because no matter what role that you're in, a lot of this can apply to you as well. It really applies to all of us. We're then going to be doing a deep dive into some of the integration of Copilot tools. And then we're going to be covering throughout the session demos and dashboards like we usually do in our webinars. And there's going to be time after our presentation so you can, if you want, come off a mute, raise your hand, and we'll take your questions live during the webinar to address any of those questions, those scary questions, and maybe make them not so scary after all. Now, starting November 2024, it's right around the corner, isn't it? We're going to be seeing the Wave 2 release of Copilot. Now, again, as I mentioned, you might be using Copilot today. You might be even starting to see some of the new changes that are coming about. Now, we're going to talk about some of those things that are being released, but November is when really things are going to go into general availability here. Some of the top things is Copilot Pages. I'm going to show you what that actually is. It's actually really nice and pretty cool. Real-time collaboration with humans and AI alike. BizChat, not necessarily a new thing, but it's an area of Copilot that has improved in terms of how you prompt for things and how you can locate content much easier ever than before. Copilot in Excel. Now this one is, up to this point, Copilot in Excel has been more or less in a preview mode. It's being released. And now it's powered by Python. Now you might be asking, what is Python? That sounds pretty scary. Is it a snake of some kind? It's the code that is actually the engine behind a lot of the deep analysis of your Excel data that you'll see. So we're going to cover some of that. And also being able to utilize your SharePoint and OneDrive document libraries to be able to do a lot of quick summarization, compare documents, generate new content, some really cool stuff there. And finally, there's going to be an introduction to Copilot agents. Now, again, this is more of an evolution to something that's already there, but Copilot agents allow you to build chatbots and workflows that are based off of your data more closely than ever in your SharePoint document library content and intellectual property. So let's take a quick look under the covers of Copilot Wave 2 features. Okay, well, let's get started with Copilot and Pages. What is Pages? Well, the first thing before we even begin, I want to point out that that / whenever you start prompting something, that's going to be your friend. Use that / to your advantage to be able to capture any kind of information from people, files, meetings, emails, you name it. That's really the only code, so to speak, that you'll probably need when using Copilot. But let's get into Pages here. So what I'm doing is I'm actually rewriting a blog article that's already been written, but I wanted to rewrite it in a way that is more CEO focused. And so I'm just having it do its thing. Copilot does a wonderful job at helping me kind of rewrite an existing thing that I may have put together in the past. But I want to go further. I want to edit things in Pages. What is Pages? Pages is a loop component. So loop components allow you to share sections of Copilot out to others so others can join and co-edit that content along with you. So much like you're within like a Word document and doing co-collaboration, it's very similar, but this is done directly within Copilot. And there's a few other really cool features. Again, using that forward slash to your advantage, that's what you really want to do because you can add things like checklists, tables, numbered lists, code, even some table of contents or anything to help enrich the document even further and really make it your own and making it shine. BizChat. What is BizChat? Again, using that forward slash in BizChat, this is where the feature shines. You're going to be able to get to people, files, meetings, emails, you name it, and upload documents to be able to have Copilot be able to focus on that type of content. Now, BizChat is nothing really new. You're going to hear it a lot more in Wave 2. But as you can see here, one way that I use it that really helps is that sometimes I forget what happens throughout the day and I have to be kind of reminded. And so I'm asking Copilot to, what did Martin and I speak of earlier this morning? And please summarize it. And as you can see, it does a pretty good job, and I can prompt for other information. It actually gives me some suggested prompts to get more details out of that. And so it's a really nice way of catching up on things throughout the day, especially for us who have a lot of things on our plate and we want to just kind of remember what was spoken about earlier on. BizChat is a really great way to accomplish that. So here we are, Microsoft Copilot for Excel. And first, I want to give credit to Microsoft Mechanics for providing this video demonstration. As I myself, I don't have the capability at this point to include the Wave 2 features of running Excel and Python together. But this is going to be a nice case in point of what you can do with a large amount of data. So here we are with an Excel spreadsheet. It has multiple rows, multiple columns, even multiple worksheets in here. And so it's pretty ingrained with a lot of data, a lot of revenue amounts. And what we want to do is we want to click on the advanced analysis using Python. So what this does is that Python is going to give that deeper analysis. It's going to create a new sheet for the results. It's going to automatically write Python code formulas so you don't have to. And it's going to answer the prompt probably in multiple messages, as we'll probably see here. So as this goes through, let's click on Start Advanced Analysis. And as it goes through the analysis, it creates a new worksheet called Analysis 1 with the data present showing revenue, total revenue and items sold and things like that. Now, going a bit further, it's going to perform that deeper analysis using Python code. And what Python code does is it can output some visuals such as this. So you can see the total revenue by category over time, but you know what? I want to go further. What is it going to be 2 years after that? So let's look at the forecast. And Python, again, is going to do its calculations, and it'll show actually a pretty compelling report of sales data across the next 2 years. So pretty impressive things that Excel can do now, and is very powerful. And also, people who are, say, like CFOs would probably find this of vast interest because it will allow budgeting exercises and things like that. And there could be some portability into things like dashboards with Power BI. So there's definitely a lot of room for usage in this case. Wave 2 also brings Copilot in SharePoint and OneDrive. And here's an example. I'm in my OneDrive and I have a couple of files that look very similar. Now I'm going to use Copilot in OneDrive to actually compare the files because I want to see what the differences are. They kind of look the same. So it's going to run its analysis against both files, the content in there, and it's doing a pretty detailed job in looking at all the different sections. Now, I tried to trick it by reordering the assessment phase and the build phase sections, and it did catch it. But everything else remains the same. So that's a nice tool set feature where you can compare content in files. Now, another use case might be that you have a document, maybe a knowledge document, and you want to convert it into a frequently asked question, FAQ guide. Sure enough, you can go ahead and just hit that prompt there, and it develops the frequently asked questions right then and there, probably a lot more thorough than what can come out of my head to write down the right questions to ask. So again, very useful toolset features within Copilot for SharePoint and OneDrive. And by the way, they work the same if you're in either of the two. And the final mention of Copilot Wave 2 is Copilot agents. And again, I want to thank Microsoft Mechanics for providing this video. Now, Copilot agents are really chatbots, but the way that you create them is easier than ever. You can create Copilot agents directly from SharePoint sites, team sites, just like this. And for example, we're going to select all the documents in this document library and simply click on Create a Copilot Agent. When it gets created, we can go ahead and share it out. We can share it out to individuals within our team, and providing that link within, say, like a group chat will expose that agent so that users can actually start leveraging it. So in this example, Mona is asking about, hey, the installation cables are deteriorating faster than others, and what is causing this? So what the agent is doing, it's going out into the document library to address the situation, to provide the response based on the documents within that library. And again, it gives you those citations there. So really effective way to quickly create knowledge base agents on the fly. And of course, it's going to follow all of the permissions within SharePoint and Teams, whether you're a member or a guest or even maybe not even have any permissions to that, you won't be able to get to the content, of course. But these, again, are a very effective way of providing some Copilot agents for quick chatbot information guides. Well, I think one of the highlights of the webinar here is bringing on Sean Farrell, who's going to give us real-world scenarios from a perspective of a CEO. Let's see what he has to say. All right. Well, everyone, I'd like to welcome Sean Farrell, our CEO of Managed Solution and founder. And Sean, it looks like today we have a lot of attendees who may have not been to any of our webinars before, and maybe it would be nice if you could give an introduction of who you are as the CEO of Managed Solution and kind of what our purpose is here.
Oh, of course. Well, thank you guys for all coming to the webinar for one. I mean, they're important. We're trying to do these honestly to get out there and educate audiences about what's going on specifically. And this year, it's been all about AI and automation and all those things. But, background, the company's about 20 years old. I started it way back when, we'll say right out of college, and it's grown from being a California-based company all the way to being now a national and an international company in the, we'll call it IT consulting space. So the fun part for us is, we both support a lot of companies all over the globe. We have a help desk. We take a lot of calls and get to deal with a lot of amazing people. And, our mission is to help people thrive. I mean, really in the business, get them to do things better with the tools that they get to use, productivity tools like Office 365 and, Microsoft tools specifically. We're big fans of Microsoft, but the big talk now, and it's going to continue to be, is everybody wants AI. And so we've heavily adopted that that both offering, go-to-market strategy, and we just want to be able to make sure people know how to go about adopting it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I don't want to I'm going to try to avoid as best as possible to avoid the Halloween puns, because we are coming up on that season. But you know how kind of scary it is with AI, that, is it taking over our jobs? I know we've had these discussions in the past, but at the same time, on a positive side, as, pre-sale solutions architect and working with our customers, and seeing how it's been deployed lately, I do see some positive areas of how it's transforming their lives in terms of, how they're doing work on a daily basis. So I wanted to ask you, since you've been using Copilot, how has it been transforming the way you're doing work on a daily basis?
Okay, I didn't think about the puns until you said one, so I was like, at first it seemed like a trick, and now it's kind of become a treat. No pun intended for Halloween, but we adopted Copilot, what was it, about a year ago. We've been waiting and waiting for Microsoft to really, unleash the product, and kind of we wanted to feel it out and how it was going to work, the old eat your own dog food in our environment. So, over the last year, I've had to think about, how I work as a human being, as a CEO. I've had to think about how our employees work, and so we've taken Copilot and used it in a lot of ways. Probably the one thing that I would say we've used it in is understanding, really how communication happens between us and clients. So our world's moved to, these online ways of communicating, like we're doing, on Teams bridges or Zoom videos and all that. And what we're finding, and I find extremely effective, is just getting into, calls and video calls and recording and transcribing what's happening in these calls. And Copilot then comes into play all of a sudden, and it starts to do a million different things that help benefit me as a CEO, from summarizing really what happened in that call, understanding who said what in that call. To be honest, Copilot with what's called user sentiment is able to look at, who's saying things that seem real positive in terms of, are they leaning in our direction and working with us? Are they, not sure about something where we have to, deal with an objection and make sure they understand what we're trying to do. So between those transcriptions, recordings, and then letting Copilot sort of summarize what happens, it's been pretty incredible. And as a CEO, I don't always get the time to be part of meetings, and I want to learn to then better the business. So a lot of the time I'm going back into these and really looking at, summaries of what happened in, weekly meetings and in sales meetings and operations meetings. And it's been hugely beneficial for me as a CEO. The other things have been things like, just looking at building out content and documents and ultimately presentations for customers. I mean, I have a lot of things as a CEO, as they say, the shiny objects that I want to put on paper. And oftentimes I need to jot down my notes, whether it be in a OneNote or a Word document or any of those, we'll call it document management platforms. And to be able to put it into a presentation that's formatted well, that flows well, and just add some simple pictures to make it, something I can present to our senior leadership team or potential clients, it's been incredible.
Yeah. Now, on the flip side, I would say that all of that is awesome. There's a ton of areas, and we're going to get back to those in terms of like the sentiment. I love that topic, by the way, and there's going to be some demonstrations showing about how a administrator who has the dashboards, the Copilot, and the meeting content and things like that can actually look at dashboards that kind of measure positiveness, negativity, things like that. What has actually captured the lean in of, for example, like being on a sales call? What spiked the interest, and what are those word bubbles that come out and things like that? But adoption is always the biggest challenge. So I guess how do you envision, if you were to speak to other CEOs, like you do many times, what is your advice about adopting Copilot for their organization effectively?
Yeah, and that's been the most difficult, I think, challenge for all of us. IT people, AI experts like us, and of course the customer alike. And that includes CEOs, CIOs, everything in between, the CXO level in an organization. We all want AI or automation, but we're just trying to figure out how to get there. The biggest challenge we've seen is it's not trying something once and then not continuing to repeat the task. So the thing is, when you think about a task in an organization or something that you do every day, I consider those processes. And one of the things that we've been able to do with organizations, and specifically with CEOs and their line of business managers or leadership, is go in with a methodology and sit with them and ask questions that are specific to understanding the business and the processes within the business, which then parlay down into tasks. And so once we understand what those things are and the human connection to those things, how humans are using or doing these different processes and where we can automate things along the way, we're able to create a business case for the AI scenario, which ultimately results in ROI. We also realize that it helps, both rationalize decision making a lot quicker for humans. And ultimately, it's starting at the top, trying to understand, I don't call them problems in the business, opportunities in the business that are really process-driven things that CEOs want to fix or optimize, that we come in and help with and then build AI strategies for.
Yeah, absolutely. So piggybacking on that question, adoption, again, this is going back to the adoption thing, but sometimes even after we, do our due diligence and talk about the best practice adoption strategies, and as a Microsoft partner, we are geared with a lot of components that Microsoft gives us in terms of helping our customers adopt the technology. We develop our own. I think we do a pretty good job of it. But sometimes there's just that continued resistance, skepticism. So I'm going to ask you, kind of on a higher level, maybe how do you go to that next level and see, how do we overcome that for those organizations that are really kind of on the edge of like, should I do it? Should I not? Is there something easy that they can go into? What is your take on that?
Well, sometimes, I don't want to use the word, well, I will use the word ROI and start at the bottom. Where's my return on investment going to be if I can, ultimately, automate this process, this problem, create this opportunity in my business that's not there. AI should, to be honest, it should be a very justifiable thing that, we can, whether it's, I hate to say it, whether it's human capital that, we're either accelerating or, to some extent replacing some of the mundane tasks. That's the first thing we should be thinking about, is how is this going to create ROI? Because I think that engages both the CEO into a more deep conversation around why we need to do this. But then going back to the top, I think the other side of it is just, walking through that process and ultimately helping understand, what's the outcome you're trying to achieve, whether it be, how we're going to ask something of some data or some platform or something else, and ultimately how we come in and, how we start to, create that user adoption strategy. Typically, I think we have to look at it both from an organizational level. What processes or strategies do we want to optimize with AI that we're going to go in and use, adoption and change management for to help, adoption grow? And then we have to do it across the line of business. When we allow, and we've seen this, individuals within the business to, unleash Copilot, you hear a lot of rumbling around, I'm using it, but everybody's using it in their own way. And again, businesses and people operate as a team, teamwork word, and they have to be using the same thing throughout that process from start to finish. So it takes gathering the troops. I think that's the job of leaders in businesses or directors or what have you. But that's the key to this, because otherwise you get what we call the Wild West out there, which you got to be careful of.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And we've had a lot of discussions about the Wild West with data, being stored in various different locations, and the fact that we really kind of need to maintain and clean that data. That just goes now without saying. That really kind of has to be done, because that's only going to give you better effectiveness with your prompting, what you're going to be getting out of from your information within the organization. So kind of going a step further, what are other things? So, well, let me ask it this way. You mentioned there's a lot of different roles in our organization. How do you kind of envision a CEO using Copilot? What are like the specific Microsoft productivity tools that you would use? as compared to going to the COO, maybe to the VP of sales and marketing, maybe to our, managed services directors and things like that. How do you kind of see the different tool sets that Microsoft is, you know, providing us where Copilot's embedded in each and every one of these?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think a CEO has to look across the vast spectrum of really everything from Excel files to how we communicate via things like Teams, and we're driving documents out to our customers and our employees, talking about things in the business. So even things like Microsoft Word. So, CEOs are using it to help them quickly rationalize stuff in a conversation. Like I said earlier, and a Teams bridge, understand what happened in their previous week with all the meetings that went on, what's most important to them. Let Copilot kind of tell you that. Review things, conversations happening in the business. Maybe it's reviewing an interview that your HR team had with a potential employee, or listening to a sales call to just understand what the customer is looking for. So CEOs use it in a plethora of ways. At least I have so far. CFOs, we love being able to take data. I know our CFO does, especially in different Excel files and things like that, and frankly, pull out valuable information by prompting it with the right questions, and then ultimately pushing that over into things like Power BI. So kind of letting Copilot play a middle role of both pulling stuff out of Excel to get the data you want, and then potentially pulling it out of Power BI to also get the same queries or data that you're asking for to be able to tell a story.
Hmm.
HR, I mean, we see, simple, fun things like, think about HR people. They're spending a lot of time, I hope, with their people, helping them accelerate their careers. And, part of what the stuff they have to do day to day from an administrative perspective, talk about employee, PTO time, handbooks, how to take, time off, what does it look like if I have to go to maternity leave? It's all of that can be queried through like a chat bot or something like that within Copilot through, say, Teams. I mean, what a relief for the HR team. Salespeople, we've seen it. I mean, they're constantly writing emails and frankly pulling statements of work and proposals out for customers. But imagine if, I could quickly, say for us, if I want to write an Office 365 or Microsoft Azure scope, if I could quickly query Azure scope for this type of healthcare company and it produced a pretty darn good scope. I mean, how much more beneficial would that be maybe in a pre-sale stage, even for engineering? I think the same thing. It's where can I go find, maybe it's learning management material to understand better, some of the technologies we're offering, or even again, how to write a better scope of work because it's been, written before. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel, but and all of that stuff is typically housed in things like SharePoint and Word or Office, I
Hmm.
should say. And then there's the fun, simple, like Outlook.
Yeah, yeah, and one of the ways I'll just say like how I use it, and one of the my favorite things about using AI technologies, especially in my job where I'm writing a lot of scopes and things like that. Not every scope is cookie cutter. It might be the same workload that we're trying to figure out how to get from point A to point B, but every organization is completely different. So that little bit of AI that goes into it, the prompting, and getting the right prompts, if you have some specific information about the customer, about the organization, it actually gives you something a lot more focused that, hey, now the customer, and I know this is AI doing it, but we also want to apply the human aspect where they're providing interest and they understand our business to a certain degree where the scope is really kind of pinpointed for our needs, not just something that has been written over and over again. So,
And I've
yeah.
seen, Jeff, people like you. I mean, we have a big organization with a lot of people, and I've seen you ask those prompts, ask those questions about, a certain project or a certain type of industry, and it pulls back data. But not only that, it tells you who wrote the previous scope, and ultimately maybe they have an expertise in the, we'll say pharmaceutical space in this particular application. So it actually helps you get to the right people quickly too.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I was going to go on to like this next question here because we are still in Cybersecurity Awareness Month, month of October. Copilot for Security, we just covered a webinar series covering lots of cybersecurity areas. Copilot is definitely, a pretty big power tool to be used in cybersecurity as well. And so from a CEO perspective, you obviously you need to provide protections. You definitely don't want to see your name being phished and things like that. What are your thoughts on how Copilot's been working in terms of security areas?
Yeah. Well, as a CEO, we have different things. We have cyber liability and errors and omissions and all these insurances these days. It's funny how insurance is sort of morphed from, I don't have an employee because we're remote workforce is now falling through the glass window at the office, but I do have to deal with, the things that are coming from the outside in, social engineering attacks, things like that, phishing, what have you. What's been here's the thing about Copilot. So it's embedded into the Microsoft security tool. So as things like as simple as where did this breach potentially come from, through the right prompts, or how did this attack kind of surface and then ultimately get into our organization. Copilot, for lack of a better word, helps rationalize that process very quickly to get us to the answer. And the reality is, as humans who are in the security world, CISOs, IT security leaders, our brains can only process so much so fast. So why not have a Copilot, sidekick, wingman, whatever you want to call it, built into things like Defender that can quickly help us get to the answer? I think it's hugely beneficial
Hmm.
versus us sitting there all day long trying to figure out, the rhythmic way in which things came in, which is difficult to do with all the things coming at us.
Yeah. All right. I got two more questions for you. All right. Uh, question number one here. How do you learn how to be a better prompter? Is there anything that you are doing, or is it just kind of playing around, seeing what the results are? What is the output that I'm getting? Or are you leveraging any sources to kind of keep up with, how to do better prompts? What are the sources that you might use?
Yeah, so I mean, kind of built into Copilot itself, it's got a lot of recommendations for prompting after you've, I guess, prompted it and asked it what you thought was a great question. So I do tend to leverage, the suggestions, the prompts down below in Copilot, and continuously work through until I feel like I have a well formatted, whatever maybe document or a presentation or what have you. So I do use Microsoft tools quite a bit to get there. Sometimes I'm using, we'll call it, what is it, Copilot free, or really the Bing search type Copilot stuff, just to go out there and get information off the internet. And then sometimes, of course, we're taking both managed solution information and what's out there on the public internet safely and
Mm-hmm.
create documents. And both are providing great suggestions through that prompting exercise. So it's definitely something that I think we have to work with organizations on. So we are asking the right things. And again, that goes back to the top here. What are the opportunities or tasks or problems or processes we're trying to solve for? So then we all come together as a group and are asking it the right things from a prompting perspective. And like I said, right, at the beginning, it's not that way necessarily yet, where I think people are out there trying it, and it's then creating a problem with adoption, which we need to solve for.
Mm-hmm. And my final question here, I always known you as, a visionary. You always envision what's out next, what's going to be kind of the next wave of things. And my question here is really centering around what's next. I mean, what are some of the innovations that you are seeing that would really kind of spark interest for our customers? And really, instead of putting Copilot on the shelf, once they get it, I have seen kind of behaviors where they play around with it for a while. Maybe they're not using it right. Maybe it's too much work for them. What are some of the more innovative ideas that you're thinking about these days to kind of sustain the AI benefit?
Okay. That's the great question, I think, and thanks for asking that. This was not prompted, but I think I'll give credit to Microsoft first for introducing Copilot, this AI tool, to what I'd consider its modern productivity platform, Office 365. But what CEOs and I think a lot of leaders don't know inside of any business is that Copilot is just a component of what is the greater Microsoft AI strategy. So you talk about Copilot Studio. It's kind of where the movie for AI is scripted, as we say. It's like where we figure out what that problem is we want to solve, what the ROI is on the bottom, and then ultimately create that script. And that script may mean that we're going to need to attach to other things outside of Microsoft, applications, I don't know, CRM tools, ERP tools, databases, homegrown applications, you name it. And what we're finding is that, we're already embedded in this world of Microsoft Office 365. We've adopted Copilot to some extent. We've got a little bit of that AI going. But what people don't know about is some of the Azure OpenAI sources, Azure being the Microsoft's cloud, and the ability to connect to data and data lakes and databases and ultimately applications to be able to query and ask questions of that other data and then really bring rich data together to give us answers to questions that we have in our business. That's the real value, I think, over time. And Copilot was just a start. So I think it's important that companies learn about what Copilot is, but what's attached to Copilot in your already existing Microsoft ecosystem that can truly create the AI strategy. And so a great story actually just talked about today was a friend of mine owns a oven, makes ovens for a big company that we all know. We won't go into who that is, but pretty soon here, the oven that we're putting in or he's building with his developers, it's going to have a camera inside of the oven with the temperature gauge that's all plugged in, and you can literally put in a turkey and through a chat, you can say, I want that turkey cooked like this one that I found on the internet. And it'll not only look at using Microsoft Syntex, which is kind of the underlying product with a probe to test temperature, but it'll cook that turkey for you to the exact way you wanted it cooked before. So sorry, Gordon Ramsay and all these guys out there, but it's funny. We were saying like cooking is now the new like workshop for men, and so it's funny how things like this are coming to be. But all these technologies to build this oven are all based on Microsoft technology, very simple to do. They just had to have a vision for what they wanted to do. So that's a great story that just came up today.
That's incredible. And that's really the key thing. As you're explaining that story, a lot of the smaller things that Copilot and AI that an organization is using, it all kind of builds up to that really cool vision, right? It's not just like, I'm kind of, if I were wearing a CEO hat, I would probably say, we don't want to boil the oceans. It's not like that we're, all of a sudden this incredible technology is going to be fully AI driven and have the best data. It actually takes time to kind of build in all the little things that we're learning about what AI is doing for us, right? I mean, starting just with the productivity that we're using today, you kind of get those ideas and it's like, oh my gosh, that actually can be applied to the next thing that can help automate and to provide, better well-being, or, a broader vision, right?
Yeah. And I mean, one of the things I'm saying and I'm, trying to help CEOs understand is we've collected all this data over the years in our businesses, whether it be, all our intellectual property, and we had it in disparate places, the old days servers and, virtual machines and in private clouds. And finally, just like we see on the worldwide internet with search and all that data's been aggregated, which is good. And we as business owners need to get that data into a centralized repository. And that means moving to the cloud, using products like SharePoint. And then ultimately from there, that data can be, asked, queried, prompted, and then ultimately give us the intelligence to better run our businesses. And all those tools are available, through Copilot, Microsoft technology, and ultimately, really the output being the business intelligence we all need to operate in a remote world.
That's awesome. You know what? I just had an idea because we're using Teams right now and it's collecting a lot of our thoughts, and we're also on Zoom from the webinar as well. So we're using multiple technologies that use AI-driven tools to capture our meeting discussions and notes. I would like to provide these notes to the attendees so they can see for themselves how AI has kind of put together in a really well thought out and organized fashion where it shows the summary, meeting next steps, a lot of the sentiment that goes into the discussions, just so they can see for themselves. And I mean, with that said, thank you very much for taking your busy time and applying that to our discussion today.
Yeah, you're welcome, Jeff. I'll just end with saying I definitely think we've seen evolutions, whether it be in technology or other industries, but we went through the social internet phase of, us adopting as CEOs, the LinkedIns and the Facebooks and the Instagrams and all the things that came at us. And we were reluctant, do we want to put our information out there on the internet? And I think, if you look at it from a utopian perspective, it's been valuable in some cases, meeting the right people in life or connecting, when you didn't otherwise have a way of connecting. And now we're in a new phase where it's intimidating. We ask ourselves, back to the trick or treat, is it a trick right now? We've got to do some work in our businesses. We've got to secure the data and make sure that, we control what we've built over all these years. And then ultimately, I really think the treat at the end is going to be, as long as the executive or line of business or IT leadership can come up with it, we can figure out how to build these AI strategies into their business. So it's a process, but well worth it in the end, because I think everybody as humans becomes more productive for it.
Well, I thought we were going to no longer do Halloween puns, but thank you for doing that. No, it's been a pleasure. And you know what? I'll speak to you very soon, I'm sure.
Thanks, Jeff.
All right. Take care. Well, I thought that was pretty cool, getting into the mind of a CEO and his journey and thoughts through artificial intelligence and how it impacts his business and his day-to-day use of things like Microsoft Copilot. Now, earlier in the webinar, we launched a poll to gather your thoughts on what you felt about Microsoft Copilot, AI in general. Does it help? Are there certain areas that you would like to learn more? And we're going to be reviewing those answers very shortly. But what I'd like to do now is just end this thought on some of the areas where Copilot also introduces itself. In Microsoft Teams, now I know we're on a Zoom meeting, but this is related to Microsoft Teams, we can actually look at a lot of the feelings and thoughts and the reactions from attendees in a meeting. A lot of good measurements there in terms of how they are engaged. When we hold meetings, especially with a Teams Premium, we can actually look at some of the engagement that happened through the meeting in terms of reactions, who raised their hands during the meeting, who came off of mute, and who had their camera on. So it's always kind of nice to know from that level of detail, but it goes even further. Copilot with Teams now has the ability to address the sentiment of the meeting. So for an example, we were discussing a project in this particular meeting, and I wanted to ask Copilot what was the overall sentiment on how people felt about the project. And the response is pretty interesting. One area is that it showed there was interest and engagement, and of course there's citations to where that is, but there are also concerns and some considerations. And what I really like about that is it gives us feedback to improve the next pitch or improve the next solutioning that we do, and the fact that we're listening to the customers even more. So pretty insightful things. I think this would be a huge benefit for anyone who's engaged, especially when you're putting together a solution for a customer, selling a product, holding meetings in general. Well, I'll tell you that there is so much more Copilot to show you, but simply we're running out of time and these guys want to go trick-or-treating pretty badly. In the meantime, we will have some additional Copilot webinars coming up in November and December, so stay tuned for those coming into your inbox. In the meantime, we have on our website some information of how you can get additional assistance through Copilot. And we're here always to help in many different ways. The website has actually a video that might spark some ideas of how you can use Copilot in your organization. And we have a few different solution options here, everything from workshops, adoptions, security assessments, that's pretty important, and building a chatbot agent using Copilot Studio. So lots of great choices there. And at this point, we're going to open it up to questions and answers. If you feel like you want to come off of mute, raise your hand. We'll take you off of mute. You can ask your question that way. If you want to type your question, you can use the Q&A button, and we will go ahead and answer some questions and also review some of the polling answers that we saw from the webinar. So thanks for your attendance, and let's answer some questions.